Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this special podcast. Today we have a returning guest to the show, Brian Ochsner. Brian is a Kansas wheat farmer. Brian is a health and wellness educator. Brian is an economic analyst. And I got to tell you, Brian has been keeping us ahead of the food price inflation on Silver Doctors for years. And we really need to have a discussion with Brian right now with food prices, because if you haven't noticed, they're kind of going parabolic right now. So we're just going to go ahead and dive right into it today. Brian, I'd like to thank you for joining us again on Silver Doctors.
Oh, glad to be here, Paul. Thanks for the time.
Now, Brian, you have been spot on with us for years when it comes to food and food price inflation, and you are one of the premier experts you should know of all people. So, Brian, you were saying get ready for $10 per bushel cash wheat at the grain elevator. It's happened faster than you've thought. So please just start this conversation off today, Brian, explaining what is going on in the wheat market. What does $10 per bushel cash wheat mean? And just help us make a little bit of sense of this parabolically spiking wheat price, Brian.
Sure. I think what caused it to happen faster than usual was the black swan of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, whatever you know. I don't know the whole story behind it. I think that whatever we're being told by the mainstream media is probably not true, 180 degrees away from the truth. I think it has to do with probably some biolabs I've heard over there, and other things that basically, with long story short, NATO's tried to poke the Russian bear too long, and the bear's fighting back. So, but back to the question on food prices. I think we will see some after this dies down. After that, we see the Russian conflict die down. We will see some the wheat price come down a little bit. We're already starting to see that over the last few days. But I think it is going to find its way into the grocery store. For staples and like bread, pasta. Just things, for your everyday meals. It goes back to what I said earlier about, I think it's a good idea to grow as much of your own food as you can. Find local farmers and ranchers you can buy food directly from. Now with breads, that's kind of hard to do because not many, very, very few, if any, farmers will process and bake their own bread. But I'd say for beef and pork especially. I think it's a great idea to take a drive out, within an hour of your suburban urban area, and or do a Google search and try and find some find some farmers you can buy direct from. Because as we see inflation hit across the board, with not just food prices going up, gas prices going up, the cost of transporting going up. It's going to cost more and more across the board. So it's in your best interest to find your own direct supply of food as soon as possible, before everybody else does, or before the masses do.
Now, Brian, the last time you were on the show was in November, if my memory is serving me correctly. So Correct. We're only talking about like 4 months ago now. And the weird thing about that is at the time, you were saying, the days of the 500-mile loaf of bread are numbered, and the days of the 3,000-mile Caesar salad are numbered. And my goodness, Brian, I remember seeing those pictures from the grocery stores and the on the street interviews from Washington, D.C., and there was no produce in the grocery stores at all. And I'm pretty sure they're not growing a lot of produce in Washington, D.C. and around Virginia in that area.
Right.
I mean, obviously in rural areas in Virginia, North Carolina, yeah, but Washington, D.C., no. But here's my point with that. Your concern at the time was logistics and transportation. And even years ago, you said, sure, there's going to be enough food, but it depends if the trucks can keep rolling. So, but that was back in November, and that was before the price spike had gone parabolic. So I guess the question is, are the days of the 500-mile loaf of bread still numbered? What does that mean? And has your outlook changed in any way because of the developments of the last month, Brian?
No, not really. I still stick to that. I think with bread, it's because it's a relatively inexpensive item. The 500-mile loaf of bread may last longer than the 3,000-mile Caesar salad. You know, just I think you may see food producers that adapt and go more towards rail instead of trucks to kind of offset the cost as much as they can. That's my guess. I'm not a logistics expert, but I think that's just my speculation there. And I guess this has all happened a lot sooner than I thought it would. You know, the timing. It's like with the prices of gold and silver. You know, we've thought for years, if not decades, that we'd see inflation, the metals would eventually come up, but it's taken basically 20 years for that to happen. You know, I've started following economics and metals markets and all markets back in 2000, and I'm amazed they've been able to game the system this long. You know, I mean by they, the government, the banks, the Federal Reserve, central banks across the world, keeping the money and credit game going, and being temporarily immune from the laws of economics. But no, to answer your question, it's still the same thing. I think, you know, we're going to see supply chains shorten up. It may take time and it may shock some people, but it will show up. I think with this trucker convoy now towards DC, that may exacerbate the problem in the short term as well, until the truckers get back to their normal routines, or at least the ones that are part of the convoy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It is very interesting because I live like an hour from the what's the name of the bridge? It's not the Windsor Bridge. Windsor is Canada. The Ambassador Bridge. And I literally drove by the Ambassador Bridge like 2 weeks ago. And it was just weird thinking, wow, this whole thing that started in Canada and went and was like climaxing there is like happening right around me. Because I want to drill this point home, because your point was that it doesn't really make sense to grow the wheat, harvest the wheat, send it 250 miles to like a processor or a miller, and then send it back and then bake it into a loaf of bread and then send it to the grocery store. It's like there's all these steps. So on top of the logistics problems, well, we have spiking oil prices and we have spiking gas prices, and that's on top of the spiking wheat prices. So it's kind of like a double whammy here. That's just kind of like a snowball that's gathering momentum and getting bigger as it rolls down the hill. Am I thinking about that right, or is there anything you would add on top of that, Brian?
No, you hit the nail on the head. I've said for years that there's so many middlemen that take their cut of the wheat for all food prices, food from American farmers. I've read an average American Farm Bureau said years ago that farmers only get 15 cents out of the retail food dollar. So for every dollar you spend at the grocery store, only 15 cents at most goes to the American farmer. The rest is middlemen. You know, you're processing, and I'm not against, you know, from an economic standpoint, I'm not against people, you know, guys getting their fair share for adding value to the system, for making it into bread and so on. Perfectly fair. But when you have, you know, now a bushel of wheat is about $9-10 a bushel, at 60 pounds of the raw product, at the store you're looking at loaves of bread anywhere from $3 to $6 for a loaf. It probably takes, I don't know what, pounds of wheat it takes to make a loaf, but it's not very many. So there's tremendous middlemen taking their cuts and add-ons. And I think you're going to see more local and regional bakeries and processors and manufacturers of other ag goods. And one crop that's starting to emerge and lead the way in making those, local manufacturing plants is industrial hemp. Now it's taken some time because it's an emerging crop. Some states like Kansas, state government and state ag associations are not friendly towards hemp because it's competition. But really hemp is, as I see it, hemp is really one of the few bright spots I see for agriculture in the future as far as solving this logistics and processing problem.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And, it's weird because thinking about it that way, this kind of brings into light the fact that you said where it's like, I think you called it before, pasture to plate and farm to fork and stuff like that.
Right.
So that's something that, like, anything that a person can do, I guess the goal is to try and, like, not eliminate the middlemen, but just try and have as few middlemen in that step as possible. Is that the way to think about it there, Brian?
Exactly, especially when it comes to beef. During the virus shutdown in 2020, we were made painfully aware that 80% of our beef in the U.S. is controlled by four main processors. And when those processors, started shutting down or closing temporarily or shutting down, that was the big bottleneck of the system. You are seeing more smaller independent butchers and beef processors, and I know Colorado has relaxed their regulations on beef processing. Beforehand, you used to be you had to have a USDA inspector to inspect the beef in order to be approved for retail human consumption. But now I think they've relaxed those rules, so it's not as stringent, and more local, smaller independent butchers can alleviate that bottleneck. And you are seeing some more processors, independent processors, coming up around the country. It's still kind of a slow process. It takes time to build these plants and get them up and running. They are capital and labor intensive, but it is a good thing in as far as the future of agriculture goes. And you're seeing more. And let me back up a little bit. So for people who want to know where in this economy where a good jobs are or available jobs are, if you can cut meat, you've got a job. There's like I've heard in western Nebraska, western Kansas, there's like a 6 to 12 month backlog for butchers to get cattle processed. So if you're a high school or college kid or even older and want a new career, you're not afraid to do some manual labor, you've got that's a wide open industry. It's like it's a dirty job, as Mike Rowe says, but I mean it's valuable, it's needed, and it's a great opportunity as I see it. If that's up your alley.
That's very interesting because, that's just kind of like a parallel theme right now is everybody's talking about we got to reshore the supply chains. We got to, get America jump started again. We can't just be a service economy. We've also got to produce things and manufacture things and grow things and harvest things. And it sounds almost like, well, this is a way where there can be respectful, good paying jobs. And at the same time, these are needed jobs. And at the same time, this is one of those things where it'll help boost the American self-independence and the rugged American, for lack of a better term, for that matter.
I agree. I think you will. And the reason we outsourced jobs like from starting in the 80s and 90s overseas and manufacturing is because it was cheaper. China's had slave labor for decades, which is not right. As we're seeing as we're seeing the cost of energy go up and cost of transportation, I think we're coming to a point in the not too distant future where it'll be cost, maybe not cheaper here abroad, but at least in the ballpark, cost competitive, where you can manufacture goods, different manufactured goods or food compared to buying it and shipping it from thousands of miles away.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is probably a horrible example, and I hate to admit this, but I'm going to admit it anyway, Brian. But I like, olives and bean salad and pickled things a lot. And this is making sense to me, and it's clicking now because there's these olives from Costco, and I really like them because they're stuffed with garlic and jalapenos, and they're spicy, and they're tangy, and they're sour, and they're delicious. But here's my point with that. I was looking up my receipts from last year, and I stocked up on these olives for $5.40 for these glass jars. And I'm looking at this glass jar, and it's a glass jar. It's full of, they're called mammoth olives. That's the variety of olive. It's a huge olive, and they're hand stuffed, and they're packed in grease, and they're shipped over here in fragile glass jars, and they're sold at Costco for $5.40. And I loaded up on them. And I went back to Costco to buy some more because I was like, oh my goodness, these are good, and I'm running low on these olives. They're $6.79 just today, Brian. And I'm looking at it, and I'm looking right to the next shelf over at Costco, and they got this 4-bean salad. It's like white wax beans, green beans, kidney beans, and what are the chickpeas called? The garbanzo beans. And it was still the same price at $6.99 for 2. So that is my point exactly, is that, you know, when the importation and when all of this reliance on foreign food comes into play, well, yes, now all of a sudden the American stuff is actually more affordable now, if that even made sense, Brian.
For sure, for sure. And I think it'll what this will all cause is, I think it could create a renaissance among smaller farmers and home gardeners. If not just and granted, some parts of if you're down south, it's easier to grow along, more months out of the year than it is up north. However, if you have a greenhouse, a hoop house, your basement, you can grow indoors. I think that's going to be one of the next cottage industries that they're going to spring up in the next several months to years. Is more home gardeners, more small gardeners and farmers that, because of market conditions, they'll be able to make more money from the fruits of their labors, compared to having to compete with cheaper fruits and produce shipped from thousands of miles away.
Mm-hmm. That is good news. That's good news to hear. And that's nice, because we can keep things optimistic, which is nice in this world that's turning so crazy all of a sudden. So let's stick on this for a second, because, we've been talking for a few years now, which is great, because our conversations developed over the years. And one of the things that you said early on, and I'm going to circle back to a few of our conversations as we're speaking today, Brian, but one of the things you said early on was, there's going to be plenty of food, or not. I don't know if you said plenty. That's not I don't want to put words in your mouth. But you said there will be enough food. The problem is going to be, can the trucks keep rolling? And then another thing you said, so we see that they've been able to, even though it's held together with, duct tape and bubble gum, the trucks are still miraculously rolling. But you also said the challenge is going to be affordability. So just like, looking at like the bird's eye view of the state of agriculture in the United States, is there still enough food in the United States? What's your general outlook on just the level in general with agriculture, Brian?
Yeah, I think as far as the amount of bushels that American farmers produce, especially when it comes to wheat, corn, and soybeans, that's still fine. We still produce plenty. If anything, we produce an overabundance of corn. The reason for that is, especially in the Central Plains, is that over the years, farmers have tried to gamble, because of low wheat prices. Wheat and corn for years were probably about comparable in prices. Maybe one was higher than the other slightly, but not much difference. So what some farmers would do is that instead of trying to raise wheat, they'd also, or maybe double crop and use and raise corn in the spring, plant corn in the spring and harvest in the fall. And although it's not the most in the western, like western Kansas, western Nebraska, it's not the most conducive climate for it. That's what they still try to do is raise corn, because you get more bushels per acre than you can for wheat. And the economics, if you hit a decent crop and you get enough rain, it'll work. But now the tables have turned. Wheat is about, I checked, mid to high 9s per bushel. Corn is about 6 something per bushel. So wheat is the more popular crop that's going to be, I think, it's going to be grown going forward. So again, I think because of economics, farmers will still continue to grow plenty of wheat. And corn, I think, and guys, you'll still have enough production from the Corn Belt, like Iowa, Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, Nebraska, eastern Nebraska. That'll be fine. I think that's, the raw number of bushels you have of both crops will be fine. The challenge will be, again, is it with the higher production cost, or higher energy cost to transport and then to manufacture it on, for the processors, that's where the affordability is going to come into play. I think for this year for wheat farmers, it's probably going to be good. will probably stay ahead of the curve as far as being able to beat the raise the higher input prices. But that'll depend. It's on an operation per operation, farm by farm basis. Mm-hmm. So that's the best way I can describe what's going on right now.
Mm-hmm. And how does this market like stabilize, or does it stabilize, or does it not stabilize? Because I remember thinking back to a couple years ago with like lumber, for example, and it's like lumber's going parabolic. This can't last, and sure enough, it comes back down, but it's always settling at these higher levels in price. And it's like, well, I mean, it didn't come all the way back down to where it was before. So, on the one hand, you got people saying, oh my goodness, the price of wheat is spiking and it's going parabolic. And then on the other hand, you got people saying like, oh no, this is just a temporary spike because of geopolitics or whatever, and it's going to go right back down to where it was. So like, which is it, Brian? Is it going to spike and go parabolic and the world's ending, or is it just a big nothing burger and it's going to come back down as soon as there's peace in the world?
I think it's somewhere in between. It's like I call it. I think Jim Rogers has predicted a bull market in commodities for years, if not decades, because of all the money printing in an inflationary environment. And as Milton Friedman says, inflation is a monetary phenomenon. And I've heard or read recently that in the last 24 months, maybe 24 months now, that 40 of all the dollars ever printed or created into existence, 40% of those dollars were created in the last 2 years. That's a lot of money creation. That's a lot of inflation that's going to come through the pike. And now what we're seeing is that the petrodollar system, which helped us escape the effects of inflation for so many years, is going away. The petrodollar system was when countries had to pay dollars for oil. Kissinger made a deal with OPEC in the 70s saying, if you'll force your buyers to use dollars for oil, we'll protect you from all enemies, foreign and domestic. Well, that is pretty much gone, because now Russia is using more rubles, China's using more yuan in their transactions, and the petrodollar system is going away. So I think it maybe leans towards the parabolic side, but I think I would call it an inflationary commodities bull market, where you have higher highs, higher lows. So it'll go like this and on up the scale as it goes. You'll have some retractions because grains are very volatile in the short term. We've had 50-75% lower days here in the last couple of weeks. But I think for the long term, until we get a stabler currency backed by hard assets, and or the Fed decides to raise rates and try and cut up inflation at the pass, which is what should have been done a long time ago. I think we're going to continue to see higher prices trending higher over the long term. We're really in uncharted waters. We've never gone through this before ever. There's not a playbook we can go to and go back and see, oh, we need to do this. I don't know how this is going to all, sort itself out economically or monetarily. But I think for the long run, we're probably going to see continuing higher prices in commodities until we get complete inflation under control.
And this is interesting because you were talking about how on the one hand this could be good, but on the other hand this could be a wash for farmers, meaning that
exactly
the grains and stuff are costing more, but the farmers aren't necessarily making any more. So in my mind, I'm thinking, well, so what this also means is it's just going to be even more challenging for the farmers going forward if this is the situation that we're finding ourselves in. So is that still true today? And how are the farmers faring through all of this? And I imagine it's got to be completely nerve-wracking because, if your wheat's not ready to harvest and it's $11 a bushel, you can't still sell your wheat at that price. So it's like, how nerve-wracking is this? Is this even more challenging? Is it still a wash? Just help me understand a little bit of that, Brian.
I think it varies from farmer to farmer. I think everybody's nervous about, obviously, the state of the world and the state of U.S. leadership, especially our president and vice president. yeah, people are worried about the input prices going up. And there are some farmers trying, I think, adjusting. I think what we've done over the years, as I mentioned before, is that we've relied heavily on, plowing and tilling large amounts of ground and using chemicals to control the weeds, and that's how we've done done business in the past. There are maybe a small percentage of farmers trying to adjust to go more minimum till, no till. As far as I know, for right now, guys are still kind of doing status quo, hoping they can get by. I'm just not sure. I think farmers are worried. Obviously, they're worried about the future of agriculture. They're not sure if the small farmer is going to be able to continue to make it, going forward. But I think farmers that adjust to these market conditions and act more like businessmen and business managers will have a better chance of success. I think with government programs and subsidies, we've been somewhat immune to the laws of economics and competition. We just for years we were the breadbasket of the world. We fed the world. We relied heavily on foreign exports to as a floor into those prices. But now that the rest of the world is becoming more food independent, Russia's now a net ag exporter. China grows 95% of their own wheat. China's now the largest wheat exporter, wheat producer in the world. These are the changing conditions we're finding. So I think all the farmers are worried. I think there'll be some opportunities because of these changing market dynamics, and to grow more in-demand crops that can be processed, a little more, locally and regionally, and there's a better chance for net profit. So there's not an easy answer to that question. I mean, I think it depends on every farmer, and operation is different. I think a lot of guys will try and get by the best they can with how they've done it in the past. But I think the day's coming when guys are going to have to go more towards minimum till and no till, instead of plow, what I call the plow, spray, and pray method of farming over hundreds and thousands of acres a year. I just don't think that's feasible for the long run.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. And another thing that I'm thinking about is there's been a lot of talk recently about the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. And more importantly, people talk about how, the government can just tap into the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to help ease the prices of rising crude oil prices. And I'm going to put this in the links in the description below, but a lot of people don't understand this, that in 1980, and this is on usaid.gov, but in 1980, the United States government established a strategic wheat reserve, Ryan, and this was established to stockpile up to 4 million metric tons of wheat around the United States as a strategic wheat reserve. And what people don't understand is in 2008, the United States sold off the rest of all that wheat, right? Which was 900 and some thousand metric tons of wheat, and it was all gone. And I'm going to read just a couple lines from the USA.gov website from the Bill Emerson Humanitarian Trust, which is also commonly known as the Farm Bill. But it's always updated and changed, and this is that. But this just talks about how in 2008, as global food prices spiked, the United States Department of Agriculture sold the remaining stocks, 915,000 metric tons, converting the trust into an all-cash reserve. So, Brian, like the price of wheat is skyrocketing. We used to have all this strategic wheat reserve that we could tap into. Now there's nothing, but we can print up money. Well, what good is that going to do, Brian?
I don't know. I think it's. I think the wheat reserve was sold off because we really didn't need it at the time, And again, I think I didn't even know there was a wheat reserve. That's news to me. So thanks for that info. Yeah, we didn't need a wheat reserve because we've been really good at producing wheat. And over the past few years, I've seen I've seen large piles of grain, both wheat and corn at different elevators. We're talking like, sometimes maybe a smaller, so maybe a smaller pile, I guess maybe 50, 100,000 bushels, and sometimes more than that. One pile at a large elevator in Southwest Nebraska, I estimate it was about 25-foot high, 50-foot wide, and about the length of a football field with grain. So as far as if you're concerned about the amount of grain, running out, I don't think you should lose any sleep about that. Again, as far as the production and raw bushels that American farmers produce, we're still one of, if not the best in the world at it. And Russia's has made great strides. So they're great producers as well. But I think as far as being in the short term, you shouldn't really be worried about the amount of grain available. Again, it's just the amount of the price you'll pay for the food and end product at the grocery store.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. And this is not an advertisement for Walmart. This is not an advertisement for Walmart at all. But I just wanted to make this point, Brian. So I always tell people to stock up on certain things at a certain time. And like, here's some coffee that I said, this is Coffee El Moro. And I said to buy this at $1 at the Dollar Tree last summer before they raised their prices to $1.25. And this is 6 ounces, vacuum sealed in a durable brick package of 100% pure coffee. And here's another thing that I told people to buy at $1.06, and now it's $1.48. This is Zote laundry soap, and this is actually, you can use this to fish catfish with because it's 66% fatty acid. This is 400 grams, but you can also wash clothes with it. There's like a million uses for this. But this is my point for this. This box of pasta. Now, I registered my debit card on Walmart in 2019. And the cool thing about that, I didn't know this at the time, and I wish I'd done it earlier, but when you register your debit card with Walmart, it allows good search functionality of your purchase history. So I've gone back and I've noticed that penne pasta, they used to have a little plastic window here and you could see the pasta in it. So they've downgraded the box. But penne pasta used to cost, in 2000, the last time I could see going as far back was November 2019, and I was paying 82 cents for that box of pasta. It is still to this very day 82 cents. So that's my point. My question is, there is a sneaky suspicion that either one, Walmart is losing money on every box of pasta they sell, and they're making it up for it in other areas, or two, the price of pasta has to go up soon, like very soon, because you're talking about November 2019, I was paying 82 cents. And we all know what's happened in the last 2.5 years, and now especially over the last month. So it's just like insult after injury. So how long, like to me, this price rise in the grocery store that's going to catch up is like imminent. Is it imminent, or am I just overreacting? Or help me make a little bit of sense out of that, Brian. Did any of that even make any sense at all, first of all?
No, it does. It does. I think a couple possible answers. Number one, it could be a loss leader. They might still be keeping those staples low, so they'll get people in and make it up on higher margin items. Number two, it could be shrinkflation, because what I've noticed in certain items, especially potato chips, are notorious for this. Like, got a bag right here of Kettle Brand bar potato chips. Love these,
Yeah, me too.
And so when I go to the store, though, I go to feel just to fill the bag, and about half of it's air. So I think what they're doing is some companies might be doing is shrinking the portion sizes while keeping the prices as the same or slightly higher to keep not rattling, to not make anybody nervous. That's my speculation. I think certain items they can keep cheap, like the pasta you buy there, the penny pasta. Those are the best answers I can come up with as far as what you're buying there.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like, it's a great unknown, right? It's a great unknown, and it's like we're all just trying to figure this out together. And the hard part about all of this is like, if it's not like a silver bug and a farmer trying to figure this out, well, the government's not going to help us figure it out at all, and the mainstream media is not doing a good job to helping us figure this out at all. So we're kind of like shooting in the dark here, if that made any sense either. It's like something is going on. something's not right. It hasn't been right for the years. So where is this leading to? I guess is the point with that. And a lot of people think, it's leading to wage and price controls. And a lot of people don't realize that during World War II, you had a coupon book and you could only get, so many, pounds of butter, so many pounds of beef, so much corn, so much sugar, all of these basic necessities. A lot of people are also saying it's going to wage and price controls like in the 70s. The interesting thing about that Farm Aid, the Farm Bill, was that started in 1980. We all know about like the 70s inflation and 1980 record high silver price and all this and all that. So it's just like, is that where this is leading? Could it be leading there? Are you concerned about wage and price controls? What does that mean from like, have you even thought about that as far as like a farming perspective?
Great question. I really haven't thought about it that much. I've been focusing just on how to, keep our operation in good shape, cut costs as much as possible, and trying to get our family farm more towards a minimum or no-till. Because with the rising price of fuel and inputs and the shaky supply chains, I think the less you run your tractor or machinery, the better. Obviously it's lower operating costs, and second, it lowers your risk of a breakdown. And if you break down, you have to wait for maybe a day, a few days, a week or more for your part. That sets you back, obviously. So, I really don't know where this all leads to. I mean, it's like we're kind of going through a snowstorm, that's with with low visibility, and you're just kind of looking to get to the next, just to see what's in front of you, just kind of the next quarter mile or half mile from there. I think from a consumer standpoint, or whether you're a business owner or an employee, I think you want to just hone your skills and be the best at whatever you can do, whatever you do. Especially in today's job market, I think that it's discouraged people last 2 years. The mask mandates, the cut hour, the shutdowns has really put a damper on people wanting to do a good job for their employer. And I understand why, but I think you want to maximize your earning potential, whether it's learning a new skill, getting another skill, getting better at sales, marketing, whatever you do. I think that's the first thing you do is try to increase your earning power as much as possible. Second, I'd say try and grow as much food as you can, or find a local farmer or rancher or gardener that's close to you. Find the more direct you can get your food from the farm or ranch, the better. Number 3, cut down other expenses, unnecessary expenses as much as you can, and I'd say be a little more frugal, and don't be fancy. I think what I mean by that is, I think that when times were good, people were nobody really cared if somebody was had a flashy car or whatever. But I think if we see more economic hardship and suffering, folks in lower class, if they see you driving with a Lamborghini, with a sports car, a Lamborghini, that might make you a target. So I think be as low key as possible. In as far as what the clothes you wear and the car you drive, don't be real flashy. But I said your personality. That's your personality. Go for it. You do you. Me, I'm not a real fancy guy at all. I'm like Eddie Bauer, Duluth Trading. That's my fashion sense there. And then I'd say another thing is just get a good network of people around you. I think and we kind of be independent folks in America doing it our own way. That's good to a point. But in life, I think in the next months or years to come, the people that are around you will be more important than ever. You're, having good people in your social circle, your business circle, and and also knowing who you can really trust. Who, if worst comes to worst, who's the person you can really believe in, and they'll have your back. And I've said before, but the most important currency, I think, isn't necessarily gold, isn't crypto, isn't fiat. It is trust. I think the last few years and decades, politicians, corporations have really, haven't done business the right way. I think we've seen a decline in values and ethics across America, even in small towns too. It's not Mayberry the way it used to be. Just treat people right and be trustworthy. And that's the best advice I can give going forward. Again, I don't have a crystal ball, but that's a good outline that's the best advice I can give for how to live your life and navigate the uncertain times to come.
That's solid advice, because we keep hearing about, people need to get back down to earth, back down to reality, and back down to basics. And that sounds like it's exactly what you're saying, which is awesome advice. And I would even take it one step further. And I say, like, for example, my wife and I been married for 20 some years now, 2001, 21 years, something like that, a long time. But my point is, we never say, oh, I promise, because that implies doubt, right? And this is kind of off topic, but yes, that just goes down to the whole point where trust is going to be one of these important back to basics, down to earth, start refocusing the things that matter and the things that are important in everybody's life. I would wholeheartedly agree with that. But I want to switch topics here just 1 second, Brian. Not switching topics, shifting topics to the topic of fertilizer, because in November you said, with us, you said, people need to start thinking about alternative ways they're going to be growing to the whole, plant, pray, and spray method of farming and things like that. And in particular, fertilizer has been a huge topic in the last month with the latest geopolitical developments coming out of Russia and Ukraine. So just, it seems like that advice was like rock solid back then. And now it's almost like, well, if you don't have a plan, the planting season is coming up on us like that right now. And I'm getting excited about growing some tomatoes again this year, because I'm be on my 3rd year. I'm gonna grow some big tomatoes this year, Brian. I know it. But my point is, what are your thoughts on that now? Because in November you were spot on, and if anything, the situation has only gotten worse when it comes to like fertilizer and stuff like that. So I don't want to sound like I'm some sort of like negative Nancy or some Chicken Little or something like that, but talk to us. Is this important? Do Americans need to be concerned about this? Is there going to be an issue or a problem with fertilizer this year, or just do you have any outlook on that or any thoughts on that since it's been in the news in the last week?
It could be. It depends on the source you get it from, or a farmer gets it from, and depends on the source you get it from, the company you get it from, and again, back to the supply chains. If they're going to be able to get it, import it and get it transported to your farm. I've heard stories of a couple of fertilizer companies. One company said, "Hey, yeah, we'll get you that fertilizer this year, no problem at all." And the other guy said, "Well, I hope we'll get it, but I'm not really sure." So we're not really sure about the end. So I lean towards the latter. I think the second guy's being more honest about it. I think farmers need to get back to basics, because there are ways you can grow crops and control weeds without having to use chemicals. That's the big part of it. And it's not just necessarily that's fertilizer as a generic topic. There's better kinds of fertilizer than others, and I think what farmers need to do is do some research and look for a more American made or American sourced better sources of fertilizer that allow you to grow, and so where you don't have to spray as much for weeds. And the cool thing is, this is kind of an interesting nature fact, that you can control weeds by controlling the pH on your land. And same thing goes with your garden. So certain weeds thrive in acidic environments, certain weeds thrive in alkaline environments. So by adjusting the pH in your water or your soil, you can actually just actually kill off weeds naturally. Here's another cool thing. So a lot of people have been conditioned that gardeners and farmers have been conditioned that, oh, I need chemicals to spray for pests, but you really don't. There's a level of measurement of sugar and carbohydrates in plants called Brix. Now, Brix is the sugar and carbs what degrees are to temperature. Okay. And the cool thing is, if your plants are healthy enough, have the right pH, and get the Brix up to a certain level, pests won't bother your plants. It's like a natural pest repellent. And the reason why is because pests like grasshoppers, locusts, etc., don't have a pancreas. So, and the reason having a pancreas is important is because we need the pancreas to digest sugar. So when the pests come up on a plant with high Brix, they sense, oh, high sugar, oops, I'm out. And it's a really cool thing. It's got a little off the beaten track, but it's part of the answer. There are ways you can grow, crops and plants without having to use chemicals, and with a fertilizer. There's different types of fertilizer. You can use. There's alternatives for what you've been doing. You can use, coconut oil, aloe vera oil, and different supplements. As in lieu of what the fertilizer you've bought, like potash is the big one, from Russia and overseas. So I think there's ways that farmers can pivot and not be affected by the traditional supply lines and fertilizer supplies as much. And fortunately, I have a friend of mine who's an experienced cannabis grower who knows some of these ins and outs. So if I'll leave a email and contact information and link for the video or for the podcast. And if folks want to get in touch with me or my friend who's the Green Thumb Ag Wizard, I'd be glad to help you guys out.
That's awesome, because it's weird because as you're speaking about that, Brian, I'm literally thinking in my mind, if we just substituted the word fertilizer for the word dollar, it's almost like I'm hearing like fertilizer's been the way it's always been, but it doesn't have to be that way. And there's actually better things out there. And it's kind of like when we talk about the dollar, it's like, well, people say, well, like, oh, nothing's ever going to happen to the dollar, or the dollar's always been, so it's always going to be, or this is America. It's like, well, I mean,
right.
There's other ways that are better than the dollar, and that's gold and silver. And there's a reason those are in the Constitution. So, I mean, not to force you into that corner about gold and silver, but the point is that there are ways out there to improve the situation that are not only possibly better, but just more beneficial overall. Is that a good way to think about it, Brian?
Absolutely. Because I don't think chemicals are great for, first of all, chemicals kill soil microbiology. They kill microbes, which are beneficial to plant life and crop life. And just like gold and silver has been around for thousands of years as real money, until we got this fiat dollar system, these alternative or natural, natural alternatives to chemicals and spraying have been around for thousands of years. We farmed and grown food for thousands of years. We haven't done it the modern way or the petrochemical way until the last 40 or 50. Well, how did we grow food before then? So the answers have always been there. It's just that farmers have been conditioned that they have to, do it the big ag way in order to make big yields. And that's really not the case. And the same thing with GMO. I don't think you necessarily need GMO crops for maximum yields. There's ways you can grow tremendous, quality and quantity of crops and plants from what nature's provided for thousands of years.
And that's very interesting. And I lost my train of thought there, but that's okay. I'm just going to keep on going with it. And let me look at my notes here to see if I can get it back. I lost my train of thought. It was going to be a follow-up question. Oh, well, I'm not even going to cut it out because that's not how to do it. Okay, but here's my train of thought. Here's a different question. I lost my train of thought completely, so excuse me on that. But anyway, so I want to get back to this question right here about I don't want to make you turn bleak or anything like that, or force you into some sort of negativity, but, we had been talking about supply chain disruptions for the last 2 years, and now all of a sudden nobody's talking about supply chain disruptions anymore. And now we're talking about like geopolitics, and countries are starting to get national, export bans, import bans, bans on fertilizer, bans on, I mean, just yesterday Biden announced we were going to be banning all oil. He literally said oil, gas, and energy. Oil and gas and energy. It's like, wow, I mean, that's just like every single thing. But my question is this: when it comes to, like, it was supply chain disruptions, now it's about like geopolitics and bans and nationalism. But are there other things that, like, we need to be looking out for that could even make the situation worse? Like we haven't talked about weather in a couple years now, and weather used to be like, I mean, like, what if we have some bad weather this year? Is that, like, I mean, that's just the last thing we need. Is like kick them when they're down. You know what I mean, Brian? Like help me make sense about that.
Yeah, well, it's funny. We've been in where I'm from. We've been in a drought for the last several months. So, and we're starting to get some moisture with some snows, and it's starting to get a little better. I try not to focus on what's, things you can't control, but the things you can control. When it comes to agriculture, there's certain inputs that can help your soil improve the absorption. Can like from absorption of rainfall into the ground, into the ground, and then improve soil moisture retention as well. So again, there are plenty of black swans you can think about. You can wear yourself sick about it. The weather is something you just have to adapt to. But I think if you can get your soil and pH, whether you're a farmer or a gardener, if you get those things as good as you can to an ideal pH level like 6.4, and the soil nutrition right, you may not get great crops, but you'll get better crops than most, or better garden and harvest than most. So that's what I say about the weather. And also, there's one thing that people don't know, but it's true, that has been, every state has a weather modification program, and has had it for a few decades now. So, when you see weird clouds or something, you wonder if things are different. The answer is they are, absolutely. So, and again, that's above my pay grade, out of my control. I can't do much about it. But all I'm doing is focusing on what I can control as far as our farm and gardens and everything else, and then and just hope for the best. I mean, maybe that's not the answer you wanted, but as far as the weather goes, I think make sure your soil and garden have all the nutrients they need and can deal with, so if your plants and gardens have all the nutrients and most of the nutrients they need and the right pH, they can better deal with a lot of drought or adverse weather conditions.
Plan for the worst and hope for the best. That's what it sounds like to me there. So,
Exactly.
Brian, so just the last question, I always ask this of all of the people that come on the podcast, and it's just kind of like, what's on your radar right now? So we're moving from winter into spring, and I can't wait. I'm getting so excited for this season, Brian. I extended my garden last year, and I put some manure in it, and I remulched it, and it's just been percolating all winter long, and I'm getting excited. But what are you getting excited about, Brian? What are you looking for as we move out of winter and into spring? What's on your radar the most? It could be farming. It might not be farming. It could be the growing season. Just what are some of the things that you're looking at right now as we go into spring here, Brian?
I'm just looking ahead and see how we make our farm more cost effective. Improve the soil nutrition for both the fields and our gardens. Also focusing on market trends. I think industrial hemp is an emerging crop with a lot of potential in the future. I haven't talked much about it, but it's been slow going because of government regulations, especially in Kansas. Kansas is not they want to protect the big three grains like wheat, corn, and soybeans. But I think in the years to come, as the supply chain infrastructure improve, technology improves, it becomes easier to produce hemp and find markets, and more importantly, be profitable with hemp. I think I'm most excited about that crop and the potential it could give to provide more income for farmers, create more jobs in rural areas, which rural Kansas desperately needs right now. I mean, rural America in general is desperate for industries to come in and provide more jobs. I think hemp, if the government gets out of the way and doesn't try and hamper it too much, I think, although we're looking at a kind of bleak, macroeconomic situation, in the next several years, decade, I think hemp could be a shining star in some of this economic dark and agricultural darkness. So that's my 2 cents on that.
So there you have it, folks. It is not all bad, and it is all about adapting to the changes that are coming on the horizon and just making the best out of it that we can. Brian Ochsner, I can't wait to talk to you again, and I'd like to thank you for joining us again on Silver Doctors.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for the time.